on the top of Daf Yud Gimel Amid Beis. And the Gemara says that Elodi Amarla, another possible solution to this problem of how the Kohen Gadol could be married to only one wife during the course of Yom Kippurim, he should say to her, Hareze gitech almanas shatamus chavertech. And the get will be valid on the condition that your first wife will die. So the Gemara immediately rejects this. The Dilma Maisa Chaverta, maybe the condition of the get will be fulfilled, and his first wife will indeed die. Havile Gita Dahai Gita V'kamle Blo Bayis. He's stuck without any wife, because the condition in the second get was that the first wife would die, which in fact she did, and therefore the condition of the get was fulfilled. The get is valid to the second wife, so he's not married to her, and the first wife died, he's not married to her either. So what did you gain? Very difficult, this last piece of Gemara. The Rishonim want to figure out why the Gemara even raised such a passage. Ella says the Gemara, the only way we can wiggle our way out of this problem is with two gitin. And the Gemara says, El demagarish lehu l'travayu. Lechada, when he delivers the wife to one of these, the get to one of these wives, Amallah, he declares, Hareze gitech almanas shalotamus chaverta, that this get should be valid if the other wife is alive and well, which means by definition, therefore, he's guaranteeing himself one wife. And to the second wife, he says, Hareze gitech almanas shalotikansi lebeis hakneses. This is your get. It's a valid get on the condition that you don't come into shul during the course of Yom HaKippurim. Now, if he gives one get to each of his two wives, then the get given to one wife, and in this particular scenario, we're going to call her Rachel, was conditional on the fact that Leah is alive and well. And the get given to Leah, the second get, was conditional on her not entering into the shul on Yom Kippur. Now we have actually three possibilities. Let's say neither of these two wives die, or let's say Rachel will die, or let's say only Leah will die. As we discussed on Amud Aleph, those are always the three possibilities. We're not afraid that they both, Rachel and Leah, will die. That's lo shchicha. Now, let's go through the possibilities and the scenarios in the case of two gittin. If neither wife dies, then Rachel has a valid get from the get-go, because the condition of her get was fulfilled, namely that Leah does not die. Leah didn't die. In this scenario, no one died. So the get to Rachel is valid. And therefore, all Leah has to do is at some point during the course of Yom Kippur, she has to enter into the shul, and that will be a bittul of her t'nai, and that would make the get invalid, and therefore the Kohen Gadol is married to Leah. If, on the other hand, Rachel dies, then that was a fulfillment of the t'nai in Rachel's get, and Rachel was never married, and the get was valid from the get-go on Erev Yom Kippur. So that's fine. And once again, Leah will enter into the shul sometime before the end of Yom Kippur. Now, if on the other hand, let's say Leah dies, right, the second get. Now what happens is that the get to Rachel is invalid, and therefore he's married to Rachel. Because what was the condition in the get to Rachel? That Leah didn't die. Leah, on the other hand, died in this scenario. And in that case, Leah was divorced all along, because the t'nai of the get was that she would step into the synagogue. She never stepped into the synagogue. The Gemara now raises the following objection. Dilma, what about the following possible scenario? Lo Maisa Chaverta, right? Let's say the second get we called Leah. So let's say Leah didn't die. And if Leah didn't die, then the get to the first wife was validated because that was the Gima tonight to the first wife. Al Menashe Lo Thomas Chavertech, and Baruch Hashem, Leah is alive and well. Now, let's say Lo Ayla Hi Lebeis HaKnesses. Leah, who's alive and well, doesn't enter into the synagogue. And the Tanai that was given to Leah's get was Almanas Shaloti Konsi Lebeis HaKnesses. And she didn't go into the Beis HaKnesses, which is a fulfillment of the Tanai. That validates the get to Leah. And we say that the get to Rachel was valid. Is Havile Gita the Travayu Gita become below bias? He has no wife. Because both Gitin are Chal, are valid. Ella, but rather, says the Gemara, Lechada Omerla. Let's say the first get was given to Rachel. We gave an example. And he declares, Harezek Yitech al Menashe Lo Thomas Chavertech. Okay, so far it's a repetition of what we had before. Ulechada Omar, and to Leah, the second wife, he says, Harezek Yitech al Menashe She'ekones Ani Lebeis HaKnesses, that I will go into the Beis HaKnesses. Brilliant. Why? Imaisa, if any one of the two of his wives would die, the other one is married. The Gemara is just fearing us, both possibilities. If this one dies, then this one is alive, and this one dies, this one's alive. And the marriage is valid. Oh, now what's going to happen? Maybe you're going to argue, well, Dilma Maisa Chaverta B'Palga de Avoda. Let's say that we'll try the second wife, Leah. She dies in the middle of a particular avoda. He's in the middle of the Haktoris in the Kodesh Kadosh. Ovid le'avoda l'mafreya b'shnei batim. The Gemara is now arguing that you're going to tell me now that if Leah dies halfway through, so now what's going to happen is that up until the moment that she died, he has two wives. Correct? And the reason for that is because once Leah dies, the get to Rachel is invalid because that get was only given on the Tanai Shalom Tamus Chavertech, and now Chavertech died, so the get is now validated. Wait, let's go over that one more time. The get was given to Rachel Almanas Shalom Tamus Chavertech. So what that means is that Shalom Thomas is the Kiyama tonight, and if Leah dies, that's the invalidation of the Kiyama tonight. So now there's no Gerushin to Rachel. Now, again, Leah was alive and well at the beginning of this Avoda. And therefore, at the beginning of the Avoda, he's married to both Rachel and Leah. And the Gemara says, he chazile. However, here's the solution. Brilliant. If the Baal, meaning the Kohen Gadol in this case, becomes aware of the fact that Leah is a goses, she's about to die, then Kodim Iu v'ayla beis haknesses. Correct? Because the second get to Leah was Almanas shelo ekones lebeis haknesses. Correct? Wait 1 second. What's he going to do? He wants to validate to get to Leah. Oh, Kadam Iu v'ayla beis haknesses. He's going to go into the beis haknesses because the Tanai was a reza gitech al menashe kones ani lebeis haknesses. He's going to run into the beis haknesses and he's going to fulfill the Tanai, validate the get, limafreya. He's only married to one wife, meaning to Rachel. But as far as the get to Leah is concerned, he's going to be retroactively validating that get. Now, all this is based on the fact that the Kohen Gadol has to be married to one bias, one woman, and not to two. Maskifle, Rav Asi, Itema Rav Avira, Elameata, they Yevamos Habos mi bias echad lo yisyabnu. In a case of Yibum, what happens if there are two Yevamos, meaning the man, the late husband died, leaving two wives, and the Torah says that there's a Yevama and you should deliver chalitza to the Yevama or marry the Yevama in the case of Kiyuv Mrs. Yibum, but that means only one, and here's a case of two Yevamos. Now we know that this is not so. And the Torah says that if a man dies leaving two wives, then one of the two will either fall for Yibum or fall for Chalitza, and the other one is off the hook. But there is Yibum in the case of two wives. So the Gemara answers, we have a special ribui, and there's an extra pasuk that's going to teach me that in Yibum operates even when there are two women, two wives. And how is that so? Yevimto, riba. The Torah repeats the word Yevimto in the parsha in Kitetse of Yibum, and that teaches us that even in the case of two Yevamos, there is Yibum, there is Zikas Yibum. Maskef lo Ravina v'temer of Sharavya, Elameata Arusa Lotus Yavim. What about a case where a man only marries a woman with eris, and he's only at the first stage of marriage, and he dies childless? According to the logic of our Gemara, based on bias in the context of Kohen Gadol, here too in Yibum it says bias. This is not a bias. There should be no mitzvah of Yibum in the case of erisin because you need Nisuin to create a bias. And we know that's not true. Our answer is, once again, there's an extra word in the parsha, hachuta, lotia eshes hachuta, l'rabos es harusa. That this word hachutza is a redundant word, and the Torah could have said lotia eshes hames le'ish zar. What was the meaning and the significance of the extra word hachutza? And it's coming to teach me that even in a case of an arusa, there is erus. Tanarabanan, Kohen Gadol makriv onen. If a Kohen Gadol never loses one of his close relatives, then despite the fact that an onen in general, referring to all Kohanim except for the Kohen Gadol, is possibly avodah, this is not so with regard to a Kohen Gadol. Now the question is, can the Kohen Gadol eat from the karbanos that he's makriv during his state of aninus? And this is going to be a machlokas tanoim. The Brisa begins by recording the shita of the Chachamim, Eino ochel. Even though he does the avodah, he cannot eat. An onen is not allowed to eat kodshim, certainly not kodshim mizbeach. And this is explicit in the Torah in Dvarim Perek Chaf Vav. And all kodshe, all basar kodshim are excluded from an onen. And according to the sheet of the Chachamim, when the Torah allows a Kohen Gadol, even in Aninus, to do the avodah, nevertheless, he cannot eat from the carbon. That prohibition remains intact. Now, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with the Chacham in a very ambiguous phrase. He says, Kol Hayom. What does that mean, Kol Hayom? So Gemara says, my Kol Hayom, I'm a Rava. Rava takes a stab at it. We'll see that this is not successful. But he says, Lo nitzra el lavio mitoch beisa. What the Torah is commanding is not just that the Kohen Gadol in this case is allowed to do the avodah be-aninus, but that he's required to do the avodah. And we're going to escort him from his house to the Beis Hamikdash to do the avodah during his aninus. And Rabbi Yehuda is telling us that somehow there will be a kiyum, perhaps, of mora or kavod for the Talmud, for the Kohen Gadol, by bringing him into the Beis Hamikdash. Beis Hamikdash is a place of simcha. It's lifnei Hashem, and we want the Kohen Gadol to be in a state of simcha. He always has to be in a state of simcha. He can never be in a state of aninus. So we have to bring him in, says Rabbi Yehuda, into the Beis Hamikdash, only almost by force, by dragging him in order to uplift the Kohen Gadol to the state of simcha and to remove him from that psychological grief of aninus. Amalei Abaye, this cannot be maintained. Hashtal Rabbi Yehuda Fuki Mafkinale. And it's really counter the Shita Rabbi Yehuda, who says that a regular Kohen, if he was an onen, then will stop him even in the middle of avodah. Sanya, and we have a brisa. The Sanya Haya Omedu Makro Gav Mizbeach. Here we're talking about a Kohen Hedjot who's working and doing the avodah of the karbonos on the Mizbeach. He finds out, to his dismay, that he lost one of his close relatives. Rabbi Yehuda says he's got to terminate his malacha midway and just leave the Beis Hamikdash. And the dissenting view is that of Rabbi Yossi, who says Yigmar. He started the avodah, let him finish the avodah that he began, and then he'll terminate and he won't begin another avodah. But in any event, we see that according to Rabbi Yehuda, in the case of a regular Kohen, Rabbi Yehuda treats aninus as being so severe that a Kohen has to stop his avodah in the middle of the avodah when he finds out that he lost one of his relatives. Yad Amrit, my sina le mitok beso, and now you're telling me that Rabbi Yehuda has a lenient position with regard to the Kohen Gadol, that we bring him out to do the avodah. This seems to be counterintuitive, because if Rabbi Yehuda sees aninus lechumra as more stringent than the other Tanoim like Rabbi Yossi, then it makes sense that in the case of the Kohen Gadol, the aninus should be more severe, and we're going to allow the Kohen Gadol to do the avodah, but we're certainly not going to force him to do the avodah, bring him from his house. And therefore, Rav is forced to reinterpret Rav Yehuda's Shita Michael Hayom, and here we turn to the top of Daf Yudalit Amud Aleph, Lomar she'eno oved kol hayom. And on the contrary, we're going to be very severe and very machmir, and we're going to say that even though the Torah allows the Kohen Gadol to do the avodah in aninus, the Rabbanu will not allow it. Why? Zera Shema Yochal. Because the Kohen Gadol, although he's allowed to do the avodah during aninus, he's not permitted to eat the kachim of the kachim mizbeach in his state of aninus. And we're always afraid that if he does the avodah, he might inadvertently be tempted to eat from the karbonos, from the zevach and from the basar zevach. In order to avoid such a scenario, we should discourage the Kohen Gadol and prohibit him from doing the avodah at all. And the Gemara is very perplexed by this. The Gemara says, Amalei Rav Ada Baravel of Rav, I don't understand. Mi goes Rabbi Yehuda Shemi Yochal. You're talking about the possibility of a Kohen Gadol getting himself and eating the kachim while he's in a state of aninus. For Tanan, we have a Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Af isha acheres mesaknina lo, shemet thomas ishta. Rabbi Yehuda is very worried in the case of the Kohen Gadol that maybe his wife will die. V'i maisa ishto, ovid avoda, and what we're going to do is by misaknina, and setting up a second wife, replacing his first wife, in the event that the first wife dies, he's going to be allowed to do the avodah. He's v'lo gozer Rabbi Yehuda Shemi Yochai. Why isn't Rabbi Yehuda gozer in this case? I mean, it's very nice that the Kohen Gadol is married to a second wife, but his first wife died. He's an onen. How can you permit him to do the avodah? And he might come to eat the kosher. Amalei. Now Rav responds to this objection of Ravada, and he says, "Hochi ashta hasam." In the case of the Mishnah, even the Yoma Kippurim, we're talking about Kohen Gadol losing his wife Nebuch on Yom Kippur. No one's eating on Yom Kippur. Anything. Forget about kosher. We're enjoying from eating anything. Inisam is nafshel secha. Kuli alma lo kachli. No one's eating. Nami lo asi l'michol. We don't have to be afraid that the Kohen Gadol is going to eat on a fast day on Yom Kippur. But hacha, here in the case of the Brisa, the Kohen Gadol, any day during the year became an onen, is the kuli alma achli. Everyone's eating, and therefore hu nami asi l'michle. We have to be afraid of the possibility, heaven forbid, that the Kohen Gadol in a state of aninus will eat from the kachim while he's doing the avodah. Rav Ada now asks another kasha on Rav. V'chi hai gavna michayla alei aninus v'hami garsha. After all, we just went through this entire rigmarole to say that he gives a get to both wives with the Tanoim that we discussed at great length. So his first wife dies, and the get is chalam afreya in such a way that now he's only married to the second wife. Why should he be an onen as a result of the death of his first wife? So more answers, nehi da'aninus, lo chayil, technically, he's not an onen because the get is chalam afreya, and his wife is no longer his wife. But nevertheless, on a psychological level, in terms of the reality of it, a true day milo mitrid, isn't he in a state of tirabim? When someone loses, in this case, his wife, again, technically, he had given a divorce to his wife, but really it's his wife, his beloved wife. He is not going to be in a state of happiness, so to speak. And therefore, he may not partake of the karbanos.